everyone. I'm Dr. Pooja Sharma. I'm the CEO of APAR Health, and today I'm in conversation with Dr. Shoibal Mukherjee. Dr. Shoibal Mukherjee has done his MD Pharma from Jabalpur with a DM in clinical pharmacology from PGI Chandigarh. His career has seen the rise of drug development and clinical research in India. He's been the founder, president of the Indian Society for Clinical Research, and in various leadership positions in national and international pharmaceuticals, leadership position in Quintiles, a very leading clinical research organization. And now he's mentoring many programs for both academia and industry in order to create capacity and further support and increase clinical research and drug development innovation in India. Thank you so much, Dr. Shoibal, for joining us today. Uh, I wanted to start with a very simple question. I know we've been, talking about clinical research, you and I, for several years. And why do you feel that, clinical research today is become so much more important that the Prime Minister in his, in his Independence Day speech actually mentioned Jai Anusandhan. So he's talking about research and innovation in his very important speech for the. So how is it so important for the nation right now?
Great, thanks Pooja for the introduction. And let me straight come to the answer to your first question. So Jai Anusandhan and Anusandhan innovation, why is it so important for us today? So I think, the administration, the leaders of the country, perhaps look at it this way. If you look at, India has got this aspiration of being a great country. We have been a great country. Unfortunately, for a long time, we were subjugated under colonialism. But now that we've been independent for 75 years, time has come for us to regain our position in the world. So I think the way leaders think about this could be the following. If you look back over the history of the past 300, 400, 500 years, there are countries that have come to leading positions among the pantheon of countries, so to speak. You have, the countries in Europe, the US, and to some extent Japan. These are rich countries, and they have become rich. And becoming rich is important for improving the quality of life of your people. And how have they become rich? These countries have become rich on, I think, two planks or two platforms. One is, of course, very negative, and that is exploitation. Exploitation of peoples through colonialism or through slavery, and exploitation of the environment in a very massive way. But then there has been also another plank which has helped them to convert the riches from that exploitation into long-term prosperity. And that has been science, and that has been innovation. And we have seen great innovators and great scientists in the Western world, starting straight from Newton and Galileo and Einstein and Thomas Alva Edison. And there's a whole long list of names which I won't even remember. So now we are in a different and very changed world. We cannot exploit people. We cannot go back into colonialism. We cannot, we don't have access and should not be doing any kind of slavery. And exploitation of the environment also is under severe pressure to be stopped. So looking at all that, we have only one plank left then out of those two that these countries have used. We have only science and innovation that can take us. So if you look at all the Indian leaders, right, from Jawaharlal Nehru, and I think he understood that very deeply, and that is why he set up perhaps all these Indian institutes of science, and we had the All India Institute set up at his time. We had my alma mater, PGI Chandigarh, set up in those years. And then there was the ISRO and the PARC and such huge and very successful scientific organizations that were set up at that time. And then through Indira Gandhi's period, we had her at least, not stopping all of that, continuing to fund all those schemes and initiatives, and at the same time, putting in more money towards particularly atomic research and the Pokhran explosion and things like that, which helped in the peaceful use of atomic energy. And then we came to others, Lal Bahadur Shastri, of course, saying Jai Jawan and Jai Kisan, to which Atal Bihari Vajpayee added Jai Vigyan, and then finally we have our current Prime Minister Narendra Modi adding the last bit of it, Jai Anusandhan. So we've seen this progression, and I only hope that these don't remain slogans, that money is put where the mouth is, and that incentives for innovation will be enhanced and encouraged, and we will see more and more innovation in this country.
So while, as you said, we have a lot of history historically when India has had from Sushruta to we've been hearing more and more recently that, India has from Ayurvedic history, from surgical history. But over several years, there was a pause, and now there is an immense resurgence. And there is this focus on Atmanirbhar Bharat, and then there's also the focus of making India a pharmacy to the world. So how do you believe that? Do you believe that really drug development in India can take a space where it's not only for ourselves, but also for beyond us, that is the rest of the world? Do we have that kind of capability? Do we believe that we can reach that kind of a capability?
I think we certainly can. If you look at India has taken great strides in the pharmaceutical space. So where we were almost importing all the medicines that the country consumed, up to just as far back as 20 years after independence, even into the 1960s, we were importing almost everything in the medical world. And then there was this change in the patent laws in 1970, and then from there onwards, the industry really took that as a positive and as an advantage, and they built upon that to create a huge industry in the generic space. Now, all that is fine. It's that could not go on forever. You cannot copy and steal intellectual property in that way indefinitely. It is there is some justification for doing that when the country is poor and when your people need those medicines and they are available to others, but they are not available to you. There's a justification to do that. But once that justification begins to diminish, then you need to be able to respect intellectual property, and not only for the rest of the world, but for our own companies, because the next step in all of this is to go on to innovation and have something of our own. If you look at the disease burden in this country, we have tuberculosis, we have malaria, we have all kinds of tropical diseases that still plague us 75 years after independence. And our burden of these diseases is higher than China's. While our population is almost the same, our burden is definitely 1.5 times more than that of China. So who is going to create new medicines in tuberculosis, in malaria, in leishmaniasis, and so on and so forth? If we don't do it ourselves, are we going to wait for the West to once again, kind of do this for us? We have to get down to it. We have to begin to innovate, and we have to produce the results. And and we can definitely do that. When you look at the pharmaceutical industry worldwide, there's so much of Indian talent that has gone in there, just as in the information technology area. Similarly, in pharmaceuticals, it goes overlooked. But there are literally thousands and thousands of Indians working worldwide in the pharmaceutical industry, and we can definitely do it. What it requires is more than slogans. It does require policy, and it does require us to open our minds, change regulation, The only area I think that is lagging behind, which is stopping us from doing that, is open regulation and a good regulatory agency. Which is able to understand science. I'm not saying that our regulatory agency is any bad; they are very good people there. But in spite of all that, the ability to understand the very high degree of science that goes into new drug innovation is something quite different, and we need to have people leading the regulatory agencies and staffed in the regulatory agencies, which are at par with people who work for the US FDA or the Health Canada or the MHRA or whatever you have, the European agencies. And certainly, that is not the case at this time.
Mhm. So that's something definitely there is a lot to grow into, but there are a lot of policy changes that are coming in. If you notice, there's this new education policy that's come in. The education policy is actually emphasizing that there should be a value add, cross-functional learning even at the undergraduate level, and that all topics which were more elitist can actually be understood in a very basic way at every level. So considering that you and I have had discussions about patient awareness of research several times and lay people awareness of research, and in case an education policy such as this, which actually ensures that at a basic level, even if you're reading arts or you're reading science or you're reading, you're not going to become a clinical researcher, but you should understand the basics of drug development or research, or understand what innovation is about. So there are changes, I guess, happening in policy, which is of course not going to be an overnight change. How do you feel that our Indian youth today can really participate in this story of development and innovation, and pharmaceutical drug development especially? So I've seen a little change happening in research, understanding of clinicians as well. So even whether you look at people who were medical students earlier, our interest in research was as long as ki thesis khatam karo and that's it. But now I see that there are definitely much more interest in research. Maybe it is so because they want to go abroad. Maybe it is because research has now become something of some a little more value when you get into a role or a job. Maybe that's the case. And of course, pharmaceutical students and students from microbiology or paramedical branches are looking at clinical research as a career opportunity. How do you feel that the Indian youth can actually participate in this future of India that we are all envisioning? And what are the career paths that are really available to youngsters today? So this is more in line with the concept that we are trying to launch at APAR Health, with training and skilling and learning about clinical research.
Absolutely, and it's a very interesting question. If we look at opportunities in pharmaceutical research, so for many years we've had the pharmaceutical industry in India doing quite well, and the industry has employed a lot of people, youth, and people with background in science. That has all been there, but that has mostly been in the area of marketing of medicines and whatever little science is involved there in making the science related to your product being understood by everybody. But then we've started seeing those changes coming in from the time really when the patent laws were changed in 1995, when the writing was there on the wall that the patent rules are going to be changed, and that the innovation would be given the fillip, and then the local Indian companies, which are the bulk of the employers in India, really, they would have to really put in money behind innovation to be able to survive. So with that writing on the wall, I think these companies started putting in a lot of effort into research and development, and set up huge R&D centers across the country. And we have many of them still pursuing it, even though great success has not come in that area as yet. And one can delve into the reasons for that. But there are these large R&D centers across the country, run by the local Indian companies, and some foreign companies as well. But when it comes to the foreign companies, the larger centers are not really R&D centers. They are back office for R&D. So you have a Novartis or you have a Quintiles employing literally thousands of people in data management and pharmacovigilance, sometimes in biostatistics and such back-end activity, medical writing to be to add another to that. So there's a lot coming in there. So Indians sitting in Bangalore and in Hyderabad and in Mumbai are doing the back-end work for the rest of the world. Data coming in from all over the world is being analyzed in India and sent back there. Now, these are faceless people who are not seen and who are not heard of really, but they are doing the analysis and so forth. So that's one part of the story. The second part of the story is the Indian companies that have these R&D centers. These R&D centers are, some of them are innovation centers really, where chemistry is happening, biology is happening, and between chemistry and biology, new drug molecules are being discovered and tested. And then, of course, companies want to be global. The returns really are attractive when you look at the global market. The Indian market relatively is much smaller than the world market, much smaller. We are probably about 1% to 1.5% of the world market. So even though these companies are fully Indian, they are developing drugs for the world or want to develop drugs for the world. And the money really does not exist to do that. So they discover and then sell it to global big pharma. Halfway through the development, when they have some idea that this is going to be a good drug. So you have chemistry, biology there, and then you have huge clinical operations. These operations really are currently geared towards generic drug development. Studies that have to be done to submit to the US FDA or to the EMEA or to the Japanese regulators.
Hi, Dr. Shoibal, you got muted.
Yeah, sorry for that. I was just getting to disconnect that. So that's another avenue. And you have in that avenue people who are trained in pharmacokinetics, those who are trained in clinical pharmacology, or working in that space, and biostatistics, of course. And then going on from there, we have a large space for clinical research. And here, both Indian companies and international companies are involved. India has a great potential in clinical research, but we must also remember that clinical research is one area of research where we go out into the public. And we co-opt the public to take part and participate in our trials. Sometimes they're sick people, sometimes they're healthy people, but they take part in our clinical trials. And we go out of these companies, so it's not closed. We go out of these companies to hospitals and we interact with ethics committees and we interact with investigators, and we have to invest. Therefore, because we are involving the public here, it must be regulated, and the safety of the public must be ensured. So that is where we come into interaction with the regulators. And then there is this regulatory space, huge regulatory space, because now that developing a drug from the preclinical through the clinical stage and into the market requires so much of regulatory interface that you require people to understand regulation. And not only Indian regulation, you require them to understand international regulation, because our companies are not working only to develop drugs for India. It's going to be the world, and we've made great strides there if you look back, at least in the genetic space. But if we have to do it in the innovative space, then that has to be even at a higher level, our understanding of the regulations and our understanding of the science behind all of this. So there is great opportunity there. The numbers that the pharmaceutical industry employs at present are, of course, a very minor fraction of what the IT industry, for example, employs. However, this number could potentially become very large, particularly if the regulations become more friendly to clinical research. Then we will have the potential that India has completely transformed. But I think the tension between bringing in regulation that is more friendly versus the safety of patients, that tension can only be broken if the regulatory agency itself understands the science, understands the risk, and understands the benefit, and is able to balance those risks with the benefits. Now, so that is where I think I'm a great votary for upgrading the regulatory office, the number of people that are employed there, the quality of the people that are employed there, the salaries of those people, where you get those people from. There are so many Indians or people of Indian origin working in worldwide regulatory agencies. Every time I have a meeting with the US FDA, there are one or two Indians on the other side of the Zoom screen. So we can always get some of those people in, those who either directly from those agencies or maybe, after they have retired, whatever it is, as advisors, as people working in our agency. Even the Malaysian regulatory agency or the Indonesian regulatory agency is larger than the Indian regulatory agency. And look at the difference in the population that they are catering to. There has to be massive upgradation of regulation and regulators in the country.
Thank you. But I have one last question for you, Dr. Shoibal. Is talking about innovation in India and all the efforts being made by entities such as BIRAC. So whether those are BioNest incubators or medtech zones, and you are seeing a lot of supposedly cross-functional zones being created, which have a lot of whether they are saying they're development spaces where doctors can also go and find the right people to actually develop products. You are in the thick of things there with BIRAC and all other and several other groups. So what do you feel about the potential of these, and do you think that youth in India who studying science and STEM subjects today will have a future, or are these things that also will take, you believe, some more time?
Well, Pooja, to be frank with you, I am not a great votary of the government taking on the responsibilities in research which are not directly in connection with public good, where somebody else is available to do that job. Now, in tuberculosis, you might say that there is not a great market, so private enterprise will probably not come into tuberculosis. So I am fully in support of government taking on tuberculosis research and bringing out good new drugs in tuberculosis. But we have done that, and we have failed miserably. We have the CDRI, which is a public institution set up in way back in 1951, and the number of drugs they have developed is 303. That is what comes on their website. And of course, none of them, one of them is for malaria, and that's Artethur, which can't be claimed as an Indian innovation. On the other hand, what about these major disease burden areas? Why doesn't the government give incentives to private industry to do that, instead of spending money behind their own organizations, which have their own failures, and 75 years of presence of this one organization that I am talking of, which is a public sector entity, to develop new drugs, has miserably failed. Now, that same money could have been used to incentivize private enterprise, or you don't even need to, give any monies upfront. All you need to say is that if there is a company that develops a new drug for tuberculosis tomorrow, which is shown to be superior to the combination of drugs that is used today, then the government will buy an XYZ quantity of that for the population and exclusively buy that medicine from the innovator. And that incentive, just that one sentence, you don't have to spend any money now. Let the drug come into the market, and then you can buy it. But the assurance that the government will do this will be sufficient for many companies to pursue that challenge and bring something out new. And this is such a pressing problem. It is sad to see that we don't have anything in that area at all, and we are still waiting for probably the Western world to give us something
for tuberculosis. Yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Shoibal. But I will, from what I will take from this is that it's definitely an exciting time for India, and the youth of India should look at actually developing products, working in research space, working in healthcare, to develop further, safer, better drugs. And thank you so much for joining us. I hope this is a useful session for our students. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, Pooja, for speaking to me on these topics.